Okay, hello pocket knife community, knife lovers, knife enthusiasts, interested viewers. Folder here. I want to do a head-to-head comparison, and I know it's been done before, but not like this. Because I watched a couple of them in the past, a long time ago, not anything recent. And man, there was a lot of waffling. you know? A lot of waffling. I'm not doing any waffling. No waffling. This is going to be straight up, head to head. There is a winner. Like, no question. All right. Now, unfortunately, I'm gonna have Kelly McCann or Michael Janich mad at me, but listen. I mean, they're both amazing knives, and so there's no real loser. It's just that one knife is clearly better than the other, especially for their intended purpose, which is tactical. As far as Spyderco will admit, and I don't know if it's done on purpose or if it's just by design of that big Spidey hole or whatever it is. But these are the only two knives made by Spyderco that I know of that have exclusively tactical genetics, for lack of a better word. Tactical genes. They were designed for tactical purpose. Okay? Um, so, Michael Janich designing through trial and error the Yojimbo 2, and Kelly McCann with the Canis. So, but I will say that after I do this head to head and we have a clear winner, there are two other Spyderco knives that, to me, have tactical and defense and offense prowess to them. And I'm not sure if they were designed that way or not marketed that way, but they definitely have it. So we're going to do another head to head, and it'll be four knives. These two and the other two, I'm not going to mention what they are. It'll be a head to head, which is the best Spyderco for tactics. Um, okay, so there are a few attributes that make a knife a tactical knife. And if you're a person that's interested in knives, then we all sort of have an idea of what it is, or what they are. The blade steel, the blade geometry. There's a few different things. The handles. There's a few things that make a knife tactical. One being tactical and one not. Like, what is the difference? Like why is it tactical? Like, right? Like, what is that? And and I think I might have mentioned this in some of my past videos, but I'll mention it again. For me, um, what makes a knife? What is the clearest definition of what makes a knife tactical as opposed to another knife? One as opposed to another is the um the overall size. A tiny knife isn't really tactical. A really big knife isn't tactical. Okay, it has to have a sweet spot. Um, and you know, around that 8 inches is the sweet spot. So size plays a huge role, but more important than size, which you can't have size without this, is ergos. Ergos and size go hand in hand, because if you have a really tiny knife, you're not going to have ergos. It's going to be tiny in your hand. And everybody's hands are different sizes, but there's a standard also. But ergos plays a huge role in whether a knife is tactical or not. Because if you can't hold this knife in your hand and use it properly, then that's everything. If it's too small, if it's not made of the right materials, if it slips out of your hand, and then there's different grips out there. So ergos, to me, more than blade geometry, more than anything, is for me is ergos. Even EDC, even if you're using this for hard cutting, if there's hot spots and it hurts your hand, it's not gonna really it's not gonna be something that you can use for an extended period of time. So that plays a huge role um, in whether a knife is tactical. Um, okay, so let's just talk about the specs of both of these knives. We'll start off with the Yojimbo. The blade length is 3.2 inches. The closed length is 4.4 inches. That's the handle. The overall length is 7.69 or 7.7 inches. So it's a little short, right? It's not. It doesn't meet that 8-inch criteria. It's a little short, but it's not short by much, by about a little less than half an inch. The cutting edge is 3 inches. Okay, this particular knife is a knife center exclusive, and it's in crew wear with smooth G10. And I specifically got this. I mean, the standard knife comes in S30V, which is also a good blade steel, but this is obviously not stainless. That is, and I wanted a crew wear because I wanted the toughness. It has a hollow grind. It's a black G10 smooth. It uses a compression lock. It has a 4-position pocket clip. Yeah, and it weighs 4.1 ounces. Okay, so that's the Yojimbo 2. Okay, and then now we'll just get the specs of the Canis. 3.3 inches on the blade. These are going to be very close. Obviously, closed length is 4.7. That would be just the handle, and 8.03 inches for the entire knife. So it hits the sweet spot. So far, the Canis is already in the lead because this being an 8-inch knife and this being sub 8 is a little problematic. Not the end of the world, but I would give it a slight advantage to the Canis. The cutting edge is 3.3, and this knife is using S30. Okay, it's got a 1-cliff blade, hollow a hollow grind blade, and it also has a compression lock with 4-position pocket clip, yeah. And this knife weighs 3.9 ounces. So 4.1, 3.9, we have a wash there. Okay, we have a wash there. Okay, so we mentioned why overall length would be important for a tactical knife. Okay, and why would weight be important? Well, it might be important. Depend on who's carrying it, depending on if it's law enforcement, depending on if it's military, depending on if it's security, depending on how much gear you have. So that's what it is. Usually individuals that are carrying a lot of gear don't want additional weight. So you want something that's going to be light. You don't want it to be too light because then it's probably not heavy duty to fit the task. So, but you want light. These, the weight of these are non-factor. Blade steel. In this situation, we have crew wear and we have S30. This knife also comes in, the Yojimbo also comes in S30. So we're going to wash that also. We're going to wash the blade steel. There really wouldn't be any advantage in a tactical sense with the blade steels. Toughness, more likely than not, won't be a factor tactically. What could be a factor is corrosion resistance. If you're a Navy SEAL and you're always in the water, then you don't want this blade if it's in crew wear, right? So that could be a factor. But overall length, we gave the advantage to the Canis. Weight was a wash, so it's 2-1 Canis. And now we'll go to blade steel. We're going to make that a wash, so it's 3-2. Blade steel is a wash because this, you can get this in S30. Okay, so let me cross blade steel off, weight off. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about the scales. We're going to talk about what these two are made of. This is G10, happens to be smooth G10, and the Canis is also in G10 with a carbon fiber inlay. Why would scale material be a factor tactically? Well, um, along with the geometry of the scales, the material would be a factor because of for grip reasons. Um, you want a material that's not going to be incredibly slippery in case you're dealing with a slippery substance. You know, blood is very slippery, oil is very slippery. There are certain things out there that are very slippery in hand, and you're wielding a knife. You don't want, your hand to slip. It's very important to not have slippage. um, G10 is an excellent substance for absorbing moisture. Not quite as good as micarta, but it's pretty good. And one of the reasons why you know it is because you can dye G10 scales to almost any color you want. And it absorbs dye. So it also will absorb a certain amount of moisture and other slippery materials. It won't infinitely do it, but it'll initially do it enough for you to get a grip. So that's a very good advantage. Carbon fiber is also porous and will absorb. Not as much as G10. I think G10 is a little bit more porous than carbon fiber, but the handle on this knife happens to be G10 and carbon fiber. So I actually will give that a wash also. I mean, they're both made of materials that are excellent for grip. They're excellent for gripping. They're excellent if if you have blood on your hands, or if you have oil on your hands, or if you have something on your hands that, tends to be a slippery substance. They both do well. If these scales were titanium and those slippery substances were on the surface of the titanium, it would stay on the surface and would make the knife extremely slippery. So we're gonna give that a wash. So it's actually 4-3, right? Because the overall length of the Canis was better. Scale material. We're gonna give it a wash. Okay. Blade geometry. Okay. Blade geometry. So what we have here we have two Wharncliffe blades, and Wharncliffe blades are really amazing in the sense that they stay on the cut. They don't have, when you're cutting with a Wharncliffe, there's no relief from the cut. You don't have to change your geometry in order to get the cut to have more force. And what I mean by that, I'll use the my Giant Mouse Mini Grand as an example here. This has a drop point or a clip point harpoon shaped blade with a belly. And when you run your finger along the base of this belly, at a certain point, the blade is not touching your finger anymore because it's swept up. In order to keep the blade on the cut, you'd have to change your geometry to keep it on the cut, right? That's what you'd have to do. With a Wharncliffe, it's a straight edge. You don't have to do that. It has the same amount of force from beginning to the end of the cut. That's why Wharncliffe blades are ideal for tactical purposes and for EDC. To be honest with you, it's just a very good cutting geometry. So these blades are both Wharncliffes. But I will tell you that they're not equal. And the sense is the tip, if you notice the tip on the Yojimbo is extremely small. It's probably the smallest tip I've ever seen, on a knife. Also, the Yojimbo's blade stock is much taller than the Canis. I would actually argue that the Canis has a small blade stock more than this has a large blade stock. The Canis was purposely made small. And they did that because by making this area smaller and by making the hollowed area on the bottom of this knife much smaller than, say, this hollowed area, and increasing the amount of thickness on the blade here, what they've essentially done is it created a much stronger tip. Wharncliffes of this type have really skinny tips, and under the right circumstances you can break this tip. It's actually prohibitively thin. And also, the hollow grind is very tall. It has thick blade stock up here, but the hollow grind is so tall that down at the bottom of the cutting edge doesn't benefit from the blade stock. I mean, it does a little bit behind the plunge grind, but it doesn't really help you in this area as far as I mean, for just cutting, depending on what you're cutting. If you're cutting something that's very difficult to cut, then it's more of a problem. If you're cutting something that is much easier to go through, of course, it's less of a problem. But if we had to give an advantage, we have to give an advantage to one knife. The Canis Spyderco claims that this hollowed out area on the back of the blade is so that it's to save weight on the blade, and it also is, when you're doing push cuts, allows for the material to slide through here easier. Both of those statements are true, but that's not the reason why Spyderco did this. Not in my opinion. I think because how much weight does this actually save? Does it really save weight? And honestly, you need a little bit more weight on a blade like this. And pushing through material, it's not that thin, right? It's not so thin that if it wasn't here, that it would have a problem going through material. This is a marketing ploy, that's what I believe, and Spyderco did this just to make the Canis look more different than other knives. And it works. It does. It's very iconic. And it's a flat spot to put the spider, and for Kelly McConn's name written on it, right? So yeah, but and it looks cool to me. You know, it grows on you. When you first see this knife, it looks a little weird, but it does definitely grow. So yeah, I am gonna have to give the advantage to the Canis. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give the advantage to the Canis. You know, just the blades alone, you know, it has just too many attributes that outweigh the Yojimbo. So that would bring our score. Wait, no, oops, I did that wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-3. So it's 5-3 in favor of the Canis. Okay. So I'm going to talk about ergos and blade geometry again, because in my opinion, when you're talking about a tactical knife, there's nothing more important than ergos. So this the Canis is a knife that utilizes the saber grip to its maximum potential. So saber grip, hammer grip, pinch grip. Saber would be a grip used where you actually use your thumb, which is your strongest finger. I mean, your thumb's not even a finger. They call it a thumb for a reason. And it's got a lot of force behind it, because the lion's share of the palm of your hand is thumb controlled, and it's where all the locking comes in. So with the saber grip, and don't confuse these two, right? Just because you put your thumb up here doesn't make it a saber grip, right? Holding a knife here and then turning and holding a knife here are very different. Maximum extension on a saber grip, right? So in the saber grip, with your thumb on the back of the knife for maximum control and extension, this knife has all the ergos to make that beneficial. The handle has a downturn on the handle with these chamfered edges smoothed out that allow excellent position for your index finger. The jimping on the back of the handle and on the spine of the blade, this is real jimping. Like, this is not just for show. The actual scales have the jimping in them, and then the jimping in the liner actually extends equal to the scales or even a little higher. Either way, you can feel them. So when you plant your thumb here, you gain a lot of traction. The rear part of the handle just lies right in the web palm of your hand, and you lock on. So it is an excellent knife for that. And the way the blade is shaped, the geometry has a downturn that allows excellent extension. If you notice, when I put the knife down on the table, you can't see from there. I'm gonna put an insert that the tip of the blade actually touches the table, and that's because the overall geometry of the knife is designed that way. When you go to the Yojimbo, it's very different. One, the jimping on the back of the Yojimbo is not real jimping. I mean, it's real, but you can't even feel it. The scales, the smooth scales here, supersede the jimping on the liner. So when you put your finger there, you can't feel it. And honestly, even if I were to attempt to use a saber grip with this knife, it's a little short here for me, for my hands. Everybody's hands are different, right? But for me, it's a little short here. So the Filipino grip, which is a modified saber, you're not gripping. You don't use your thumb necessarily in the base of the handle where the blade and the handle meet. You actually use the ramp on the back of the knife for a different effect on control. So Michael Janich designed this knife specifically. That's why it has this smooth back. That's why it has this thick blade stock, and it's extremely comfortable to have your thumb right here using this knife with the Filipino grip. For me, the saber grip is superior because of the extension, because of the location of your hands, because the blade handles longer and it fills up the palm of your hand for greater control. Someone with smaller hands might agree with this knife, but I avidly do not. Also, I'll show on the insert that when this knife is put down on the table, the Yojimbo, as you can see, the blade is rising off the table, right? So we have the knife sitting flat, the blade is rising up, because what they did was they angled the blade upward. That upward angle, for me, doesn't give the optimal extension when you're holding the Filipino grip or saber. For me, it seems like you have to really exaggerate your wrist more to get that angle that you want. So yeah, so I'm gonna clearly, unfortunately, but clearly, and actually not unfortunately, that's what it is, give the advantage to the Canis with the ergos and the handle geometry. Okay, blade geometry and handle geometry. So that would be 6-3. And the final category would be lockup and deployment. They both use a compression lock. So they both use, right, the compression lock, and the compression lock is definitely a locking system that that is right hand biased. Yeah, it's right hand biased. It's an excellent lock. It's very strong. But it's right hand biased. So it does take away a little bit of the ambidextrous desire that you would have for a knife that just checks off all the boxes. It's not a thing though. I mean, you can easily deploy this knife left-handed or right-handed. It's just that closing it left-handed with the compression lock is a little challenging sometimes. That's one of the reasons why Blades We Love made the Ambi with the PM2. So the ambi is a compression lock with an extra button here, which allows for right hand deployment using the lock or left hand deployment using the locking button. That button just deploys it on either hand. Both of these knives use the compression lock, and they could be ambiized. They could be, but they're not. But so they're gonna get, so they both use the same lock, so I'm not gonna give either advantage to either one. They'll both get a point for it. Okay, and that would end our test, and that would give us 7-3, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? That would give us 7-3 advantage for the Canis over the Yojimbo 2. So from a tactical standpoint, my opinion is that the Spyderco Canis is a superior tactical defense offense knife over the Yojimbo 2. Having said that, the Yojimbo 2 is an excellent tool, and they both are great for EDC. They're both great for everyday tasks, everyday minor cutting tasks. Okay, so that's all I got.